The following is a Shaw TV Public Affairs presentation. Constituency Report is produced as a public service by members of the BC Legislature through the facilities of Shaw TV.
Hello and welcome to Constituency Report on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Megan Black here, and with me today we have Rob Fleming, the MLA for Victoria Swan Lake and the Minister of Education. Thanks for joining me, Rob.
My pleasure.
Now, so much has happened since we last spoke in the fall. Specifically, we've recently seen the first full BC NDP budget. I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about the highlights on that.
Well, I'm really proud of this budget that our new government tabled. It's the first progressive budget that the province of British Columbia has had for 16 years. It's all about making life more affordable for middle-class British Columbians who've struggled under higher housing costs, fewer transit options, the cost of almost everything going up in their consumer good baskets. And so where government was able to provide some significant relief, for example, getting rid of a regressive flat tax like the medical services premium, we put in bold action to do just that. When it came to increasing the rental housing supply in extremely low vacancy markets like Greater Victoria and Vancouver and other parts of the province, the most ambitious housing construction and development plan in the province's history. So big responses to large persistent problems that for many years went unaddressed. And of course, for young parents, the most ambitious plan we've ever had around early childhood education, which will have an economic benefit for everybody in the province and will help us and business owners in British Columbia retain skilled employees. So there's lots of good news in here that will build upon our sustainability and prosperity agenda. Lots of investments, record investments in education, some very targeted resources as well into key areas of the healthcare system that need attention, need fixing around patient care. And again, I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of my colleague Carol James, the Minister of Finance, to bring in some bold new programs to protect the surplus and fiscal position of the province, and to bring in some tax measures and tax relief for the middle class and for small business owners that I think is much needed.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot to talk about, so let's get right into it. Now, I know many people will have noticed January 1st, a decrease in what they're paying for MSP. So I'm wondering if you could walk us through what the plan is for that in the years to come.
Yeah, British Columbia, as I think some of the viewers will recall, is the only province in Canada left with a regressive healthcare tax, basically a tax on your income to register for Medicare. A very odd tax, one that the previous government increased 10 times almost every budget year during their 16 years in office, that doubled the rates to very high impediment, $1,800 a year per family, $900 per year for an individual. And hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of British Columbians were left to pay for it on their own. So every self-employed person, every small business person, many employees, especially in the service and hospitality industries and other industries, paying this regressive tax. I say regressive because somebody making $40,000 a year paid the same as a millionaire making $4 million a year. So and even millionaires, to their, to defend them for a second, thought that this was an absurd way to have a tax. So that flat regressive tax has been cut by 50%, as you mentioned. That happened New Year's Day, and our plan is to phase out the tax entirely over the next 3 years. We will move into what is called an employer health tax, which is a feature in other provinces. It comes on the payroll. British Columbia's will be the lowest in Confederation of all the provinces. And we will transition over the next couple of years into getting rid of that tax. The good news is there's really not that many levers that government has to instantly put $1,800 a year, like real money, into working families' pockets. And I say as the education minister, but also an MLA for a working class, middle class community, being able to help families cope with the costs of registering their kids in sports or music or other activities, being able to, pay for clothes and groceries, and $1,800 is a good money. It's real money to put back into people's pockets, and by abolishing this tax and moving quickly to do so within the first budget opportunity of John Horgan and the New Democrats government, we've moved fast to be able to provide this kind of relief.
Now, on the topic of healthcare, I understand there's some really exciting news with Pharma Care as well, just to make things more affordable for people.
Yeah, look, we have a problem in our healthcare system when low-income people have to choose between feeding themselves, paying for all kinds of bills, or taking the prescription drugs that will get them well. And we had a lot of evidence to suggest that many British Columbians weren't getting better because they were foregoing the prescription drugs that were part of their recovery or illness treatments, and that is just unacceptable. So for hundreds of thousands of British Columbians, we have removed the deductibles on their prescription drug plan, and this will help them be able to live more affordably, but also work with their doctors and medical teams to get the drugs that they need to recover. So this is really about helping some of the more vulnerable and low-income people in British Columbia, but it also includes a lot of people who are working full-time, quite frankly, who make $30,000 a year or less, and may have kids in their house, and they just can't make ends meet and pay for their prescription drug costs. So a very progressive move, one that I think is targeted at a population that needs our government's help. And again, the earliest budget opportunity was the one where we put this new policy into place.
That's great. So government really seems to be doing a lot to make healthcare more affordable. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about what the budget does to make the quality and the services that people expect from healthcare much better.
One of the things that we're trying to do as a government is create what we call primary care centers that are cheaper to deliver the services, but also better, more desirable, especially for young doctors. We've heard a lot of young doctors and nurse practitioners say, we want a team-based, community-based healthcare approach where we have patients, many of whom have no connection to a GP, a family doctor today. So it's about using existing resources better, but also having a more responsive model. We've got all kinds of problems in the private care clinic situation today that need our government's attention, and part of it is to look at, if you like, a model that has existed in some form. Some of the viewers may be familiar with the James Bay Community Healthcare Clinic. That's existed since the 1970s. It serves a large population, many of whom are seniors and elderly citizens in that area. It does it cheaply, it does it well. This is really to see whether we can build upon elements of that model, get them in communities right across British Columbia, get them into other parts of Greater Victoria where we have a doctor shortage. And so there's some more deep thinking and planning going on in that regard, but we've got a lot of people engaged who know how to do this type of thing. We've seen this model work well in other provinces. Another specific initiative that we're doing as a government is trying to reduce wait lists for surgeries that are key to people's quality of life, and other diagnostics that then may lead to life-saving surgeries. We have way too many people waiting far too long for hip and knee surgeries, for example. Is there a better delivery model? We had a clinic that was efficient, publicly funded in Richmond that was scaled back by the previous government. We're looking to invest again so that people waiting for those kinds of key quality of life operations aren't waiting in pain for as long. So there's lots to do there, but there's targeted resources there. And the final thing I think that's really good news for seniors in my community and right across British Columbia is a huge investment, $548 million in the years going forward, to build more residential care facilities. We have an aging population. We haven't kept up with that demographic shift, and this investment will help address housing issues, but also a healthcare gap around not enough residential care facility beds.
Now, there's been a lot of talk in recent weeks about the two big parts of the budget, that being childcare and housing. I know we could speak at length on both of these topics, but I'm wondering if you could just sum up the highlights in those two areas for you and for the community.
Yeah, let's start with childcare. I think this is really, really exciting because it's charting a course in British Columbia for a universal childcare plan that will invest heavily in early learning. And I'm excited about it as the Minister of Education because having more kids involved in high quality childcare, which is the aim of this plan, $1 billion over the next 3 years to get it started. There's three elements here. More spaces. We have a shortage in BC and especially in this region. Better quality childcare, so supporting existing operators and new childcare centers that may come into existence have a high quality agenda, and also make it more affordable for families. So families should begin to see a $350 a month fee reduction. Low-income families could be exempt from fees entirely, depending on their income, and it will stretch into the reach of some working families. So there's all of that to be excited about. But again, as an education minister, I'm really excited about what this investment will mean writ large. We have too many kids arriving in kindergarten deemed not ready to learn day one, that have a number of vulnerabilities, that are seen by the school system. From the first day of their school career, they have less of a chance than other kids getting into the school system. And it's often the kids, most often the kids who have no connection with early childhood education that are most disadvantaged as they get into the K-12 education system. Why is that important? We need to graduate kids and have kids more engaged in their early learning years to enjoy school, to be productive in school, and also, most importantly, to be able to take on the career opportunities that exist when they transition out of grade 12. And I think the way that we make BC more successful in doing that is exactly what our government is doing. Invest in those early learning years. We will have much better student success and better outcomes in the K-12 system and then beyond in the post-secondary system. That's how you build a diversified, dynamic economy and help families today and a sustainable, prosperous British Columbia in the years ahead.
Now on housing, like I mentioned, there's a lot we could talk about, but specific to Victoria, could you tell us a little bit about what UVic might have going on and the excitement there about new housing opportunities?
Yeah, I think there's some really, really good news here around housing. First of all, we've closed a lot of bad loopholes that were disadvantaging renters and creating chaos in the residential tenancy branch. So there's that side on, we've made some reforms. We've also announced a significant amount of money that the nonprofit housing sector will be able to utilize, work with municipal governments, get zoning approvals done, and get family affordable housing built in our communities. There's also some targeted funding on those that are living in a homeless situation in our region and other parts of BC that's very targeted. And finally, I think after 10 years or more of really a housing moratorium on campuses, university and college campuses in BC, we've got a significant capital fund now to let universities borrow self-supporting debt to build residences. So I hope to see housing starts for residences at UVic and possibly Camosun in the very near future. I've already seen the nonprofit housing sector in my constituency sign memorandums with BC Housing and with city local governments to create intentions around new family housing projects. So there is so much pent-up demand to deliver on the housing needs in this region. They didn't have a reliable provincial partner for so many years. They have that now, and I think you're going to see a lot of positive activity.
Now we're going to go to a break in just a couple minutes here, but before we do, what are you hearing from people when you talk about the budget? What are they saying to you?
I think a lot of things. I mean, if it's parents involved in the education system, they tell me that they really like their kids coming into smaller kindergartens and smaller grade 1 to 3 classes. They like the addition of resources around new teachers. There's smaller schools that now have full-time librarians again, and all the literacy services that happen there. So there tends to be a real excitement in the school system. There's a lot of positive momentum and good direction there. What I'm hearing from others is that they're giving the government an A for effort and also for delivering on some key promises around housing. We've also been able to solve some transportation problems. I'm very pleased that just recently over in the Lower Mainland. The previous government that had referendums and they ground TransLink to a halt and failed to take advantage of our federal government, who wants to invest billions of dollars into solving the gridlock and transportation chaos in the Lower Mainland. We were able to come up with a deal with mayors who the previous government fought with for years and years and years. So we've got the most significant transit investment agenda going forward that we've ever had in the province of British Columbia. So that's great, and that has a ripple effect here in on the South Island and in the Capital Region. So, on housing affordability, on putting money into people's pockets by abolishing the MSP, improving the school system, making investments in advanced education, supporting small business, supporting an innovation agenda, working with a number of emerging industry sectors. It's a jobs and affordability agenda that I think I'm hearing, from my constituents that they appreciate. It's a change of channel from what they were used to from their previous provincial government. They feel listened to, they feel heard, and they feel like their government is delivering quickly.
Perfect. So we are going to take a quick break here on Constituency Report. Again, I'm with Rob Fleming, the MLA for Victoria Swan Lake and the Education Minister. Be sure to grab a pen and paper, as his contact information will come up on the screen soon. Make sure to stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to Constituency Report on Shaw TV. I'm your host, Megan Blackier, and with me today we have Rob Fleming, the MLA for Victoria Swan Lake and the Education Minister. Now, Rob, just before the break we were talking about some of the highlights of the budget. There's a big one that you mentioned a little bit before we took a break was transit, especially in Victoria, all the opportunities that we have and what that means to the community.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen some service declines here in recent years. There's huge growth potential for transit service, and a lot of major corridors are underserved by transit. When the previous government invested in the Mackenzie interchange, which was designed to solve a bottleneck on that highway, one of the things that struck me and a lot of my constituents was that we need to plan for growing the ride share of public transit service. So we've got buses stuck in the same traffic as cars coming in at the rush hour, coming and going, and only 7% of all passenger trips are on a BC Transit vehicle. Something like 50 or 55% of that traffic are single occupant vehicles. So we can just continue to engineer for cars, or we can try and fix the problem, and that's what we're focusing on now. So there is high priority bus lane going out to the number one to the West Shore, and we're working on that in various stages now. We've allocated some money in this budget. Equally important is that we're going to now be able to add millions of dollars from a regional transit tax on the fuel to increase service on all the key routes. So more frequency, more reliability, getting to people to work and school on time. Is a way to build confidence in the transit system. The system needed a boost on the funding side, and we've been able to add millions of dollars annually to allow them to add service now and plan into future years. So I think, having had a lot to do with transit over the years myself, having once been a transit commissioner, I know what's needed in that sector, and we're just getting started. But I think the good news is that public transit now in Greater Victoria is moving in the right direction. So we can look for innovation and new past programs, and I've got my eye on lots of those kinds of things working with my colleagues in this region. The key was to be able to start increasing service now, put some infrastructure dollars into place, and make sure we get our claim on the next round of money with our federal partners on more infrastructure and more service.
Well, that's great to hear. I mean, you talk to anyone in transportation in Victoria is always such a hot topic issue, so it's great to see the government taking action to address that. Now, another huge area of the budget and the government's mandate has to do with education, and I figure you're the best person to talk to about that as Minister of Education. So what have you been up to since we last spoke in the fall, and can you tell me about what may be coming up in the future?
Well, this has been an incredibly busy and very unusual school year, unusual in a very good sense, and that is because we have hired the single greatest number of teachers in generations. So 3,700 new teachers in the school system, 600 new education assistants hired, so more one-on-one time with students in BC, and that's good news because that's how, again, we want to see benefits and see a higher rate of student success in the school system to help that last sort of 15% of kids who aren't successfully getting through school today, by having things like the lowest teacher to pupil ratio in BC's history is good news. There's a lot to do around the curriculum agenda. We've sort of saved the best for last. Grades 10 to 12. K to 9 was very successful. The trickier part perhaps is the senior grade level, so we're out consulting on the graduation program right now, and we'll get a lot of feedback from teachers and professionals in the school system, parents as well. Everybody's welcome to comment on that. That's a pretty exciting consultation. We're also undergoing the first K to 12 funding review in the province in 25 years. This is of interest to parents and educators and those working in the school system for a bunch of reasons. One is that there were a lot of criticisms about the previous funding model in the system. It was often leading to cutbacks and a lack of predictability year over year in the school system. That's why you saw 250 schools close under the previous government. We're in a different situation now, and we've seen other jurisdictions review their funding formula. It's something that we committed to. It's something the sector is very engaged in, so we're going to be undergoing that piece of work. The other is around school construction and school capital. Look, we inherited a huge backlog of seismic projects that were promised by the previous government but weren't delivered. We have the largest school construction budget in BC history, $1.8 billion over the next 3 years. And we're looking to get started and help fast-growing school districts. We've made a number of announcements in Souk here on the South Island recently, which actually is the fastest-growing school district per capita in the province now. But the Surreys and the Langleys and the Chilliwacks, there's about 10 fast-growing districts that will be helped additionally by this capital budget. We will help all of those schools on the fault line where mums and dads and students and parents have to worry about whether that building will survive in the event of the big one. We're getting on to more seismic approvals more quickly, so we've accelerated those. And I think just overall there's been a neglect of some facilities around BC as more and more facilities fall into disrepair. We've got funds going into that to fix up our school buildings. So I think it shows a real departure from the previous government that often undervalued education. We're investing in teachers, we're investing in learning resources for kids, and we're investing in schools that are really the anchor of neighborhoods and communities around British Columbia.
That's great to see, and education has been such an important issue in British Columbia and that was neglected for so many years under the BC Liberals. So seeing the government take action on that is great, and I'm sure the feedback that you're getting from people is also very positive.
It is, and there's some of the most important people in the school system, teachers, our teaching professionals. There's no way that British Columbia would be posting internationally recognized results around student achievement without having some of the best teachers in the world. So I don't know why the previous government, pursued a strategy of alienating teachers and fighting with them for over 12 years in the court system. We're looking at working closely with teachers. We are working with them. We also are working on a recognition program for teaching excellence in the school system. The same goes for support staff. Critically important, educational assistants, all of the wonderful people who keep schools running need to be recognized, and we're doing that as well. Leadership, we're investing in leadership at the principal and vice principal level, because you don't have great schools without having great principal and vice principal leadership levels. And I think all the stakeholders, working closely with school districts, trustees, elected officials, very important, superintendents, It's just a different relationship. It's one based on respect, where we co-govern the education system together, not at loggerheads, but in common purpose. And I'm thrilled with where we are, just 7 months into government, because everybody's getting on with things. There's an excitement and enthusiasm to be innovative and to spread the good news about BC's public education system. Parents deserve to have the highest level of confidence in the school system, and they should. And we need to tell our story better, and we're starting to do that.
That's great to hear. Now we have a couple minutes left of the show, and what we're going to do is actually take a look at some photos from you in the community over the last few months, and you can walk us through that.
So we were talking about the need for designated bus lanes to declog transit service, and this is exactly that. This is an announcement that I participated in with the Mayor of Victoria and my colleague, the Minister of Transportation, Claire Trevena, to announce an investment in the bus lanes on Douglas Street. And this is an interesting piece of history that is of significance to my constituency, but also happens to be an educational institution. Lansdowne Middle School was once our airport up until the 1940s, and made aviation history by having one of the first flights in Canada in a Canadian-built aircraft. In fact, it was the first flight. So that's part of a recognition program that the province undertook. And this is me reading to a group of students, taking a little bit of time while I was out at Keating Elementary, making one of the seismic investments in making our schools safe that I mentioned earlier. And I have to say that was a pretty fun afternoon.
The perks of the job.
That's right. And this is me with my colleague Lana Popham and Mitzi Dean, meeting with Chinatown business owners during Lunar New Year. This is me with students from, let me think what school, Reynolds Secondary, and Premier John Horgan, who is a Reynolds alumni and was the class president once upon a time, on Pink Shirt Day to promote anti-bullying, and with an emphasis this year on stopping cyberbullying. And this is my son and I at Black History Month with some of the organizers and award recipients celebrating 150 years of Black achievement in British Columbia and major cultural contributions in the arts, business, and it was actually really amazing to meet this year's award recipients, just to hear what's happening in our community, and just amazing people that are doing really incredible things on a daily basis in Greater Victoria. And this is a robotics competition, again with the Premier. He seems pretty enthusiastic to be meeting with this group of students from Spectrum, who designed and built a robot in less than 20 days to participate in the first choice competition activity, and that a number of schools in BC are going all the way to the North American finals. And this was a first entry for Spectrum. They did an amazing job.
So it sounds like you've been busy, up to a lot, with the recent budget, being out in the community, and then your work as the Minister of Education. We're just heading into the last bit of the spring legislative session, and I'm wondering if you could tell me, what you hope to see, what you hope to get out of it, and what the government's priorities are.
Yeah, I think there's going to be more emphasis on housing, and there'll be some legislation around that where we have to fix some things that are barriers to building affordable housing in communities like ours. Of course, the federal government has handed the provinces all the task of figuring out a way to legalize cannabis. And we want to make sure that we get the right kind of regime in place that will protect young people and also have a rational market. So that'll be, no doubt, a long piece of debate in the legislature. I think our attention is going to be focused on driving improvements in the education system. I think constituents are going to hear more about the 2,900 new seats in advanced education, the largest expansion of seats in 10 years. So, the budget is going to be debated for another couple of months, and the good news that flows from that budget will be highlighted for many weeks to come.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time to be here with us. I know you're very busy, but we love when you stop by to give people an update about what's been going on. So thanks so much, and thank you for watching Constituency Report on Shaw TV.